Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. The deafening chance of 4 more years, US President Barack Obama in his final address as president cautioned against everything that incoming President Donald Trump has publicly espoused, including anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, anti-women, anti-gay, pro-Russian and pro-rich sentiments. As he ascended the stage in Chicago, the crowds roared, 4 more years, 4 more years, even as Obama tried to quiet the very emotional gathering of people who had come to see off the man who finally avenged 9/11, made gay marriage legal and ensured healthcare for all Americans. While Obama can rightfully boast about a vastly improved economy and other changes during his tenure, the man who's taking his place in the Oval Office has promised to reverse much of what Obama accomplished. And while the president remains personally popular, his Democratic Party is weaker than it was 8 years ago, reducing its chances of protecting Obama's legacy. On this edition of The Big Picture, we'll take a look at the hits and misses of Obama, the president. Joining me on the program today are Chintamani Mahapatra, Chairman, Center for Canadian, US and Latin American Studies, JNU, Suresh K. Goel, former ambassador, Kamar Aga, International Affairs expert and senior journalist, and Alok Bansal, Director, India Foundation. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Professor Mahapatra, I'd like to start with you, of course, and talk about the positives. You know, in 2008, when President Obama took over as the President of the United States, the economy of the United States wasn't doing very well. He ensured that he created jobs and he ensured there was a rebound or rebounds of the economy as such. And that definitely can be listed as one of the positives and one of the legacies of Obama.
Quite right. And in fact, when the American economy was moving into the recession, at that time it was a very big challenge for an African American president to really say that he is going to set things right. And today, if you analyze a set of statistics, then continuously for 75 months, when the jobs were created positively, then Obama has something good to claim about it. And in fact, the overall American economy also has not slided down. Rather, it has become more stable than before. And compared to what is happening in Europe, in Japan, in Southeast Asia, American economy is okay. Having said that, it all depends how one looks at the statistics. Every time there is an American election, the economy is very, very important agenda item. And during this campaign also, when the Republican Party candidates were repeatedly talking about the job losses, going to create new jobs, he's the one who is going to bring back manufacturing into the American economy. He's the one who is going to give priority to American jobs, American companies, American hands, American workers. That means what? That means the statistics always reveal half the truth. The other half is half done by the other side. So while Obama definitely can claim that the American economy is more stable than before, Donald Trump probably is going to argue that he is going to set things much better than what it has been now.
Indeed. You know, as far as Donald Trump is concerned, Ambassador, at least the economy is being given to him on a platform unlike what Obama inherited in 2008, isn't it? Because there is something for Donald Trump to build on now. Now, he's promised a major tax overhaul. How much of that is really going to, how much of impact are we going to see from that?
Let me put it this way. First of all, that it's rather a pity that all this data about the growth in employment, the emerging from the recession, etc., that all the data that began to come out in the media happened more or less around same time when the election campaign was on, and it appeared like all this is happening basically because Obama is now leaving, his presidency is over, while actually the economic change turnover was more a result of the policies that Obama adopted in terms of creating employment, inclusive policies, economy, etc., etc. So yes, in that sense, Trump has the advantage of inheriting an economy which seems to be doing well as compared to what Obama had 8 years ago. It's going to be very, very difficult to forecast because the economic progress or the economic growth is not simply a matter of the domestic policies of a country. Now, we know it very well that the focus of Trump is going to be more within USA. What the USA is all about is going to be more introvert, inward-looking policies. and defying all trends of globalization. But how it actually impacts on the economy of USA is very, very difficult to forecast. I will not really dare do so. There are different ideas. I don't think it's going to be possible for Microsoft and Ford and the other companies of the USA to completely just come back from wherever they are into the USA. It's going to be impossible, really. Trump himself, yes, he will wind up his projects, not wind up the projects, but at least he will not go into the newer projects because he's now the president.
Indeed.
But I don't think that he's going to be able to retract from the projects which have already taken off, really. So I don't think that inward-looking policies can really work in the manner, and I'm sure that as time goes by, Trump will have to look at the larger picture.
Indeed, indeed.
And see what the corporate interests are. So, on the whole, looking at the world indicators, the global indicators, I think it's too early to say anything at all what Trump impact would be on.
Sure, sure. Before we widen the scope of the debate and bring in some of the other aspects of foreign policy, military, and what Obama has done on those fronts, I want to stick to economy for just a couple of more minutes. Alok Bansal, as far as Obama is concerned, he took some bold decisions in 2008. The controversial auto rescue that he conducted was ridiculed by the Republicans and said that it was going to be a complete failure. But the impetus that the auto industry got as a result of Obama's intervention ensured that the auto industry survived and then later on did well in the years to come. So these were some of the bold steps that he did take and which were required at that point in time.
Undoubtedly, I think as far as the economic and social issues are concerned, I think healthcare scheme is the one which is actually on the firing line. Trump has been talking about it. I think Obama presidency was marked by certain path-breaking decisions. I think when you're looking at domestic things, it was the healthcare. But it's on international affairs that he took certain path-breaking decisions. I think in the recent past, he was the first US president to talk about global zero, thereby talking of complete elimination of nuclear weapons. I think in the recent past, I haven't heard any US president say so. So, however hypothetical it may have been, but he did talk of elimination of nuclear weapons, projecting them as weapons of. He successfully wound up the Iraq war, US involvement in Iraq, I think, and to that extent one has to grant him credit. Of course, his critiques find that his actions in Syria were probably lackadaisical. He did not take bold initiative, but I think he was sensible that he did not get into the quagmire of the Syrian war as his allies in Europe wanted him to. And I think later events have shown that by doing so, he would have only ended up helping IS or Al-Qaeda. Of course, other events of his presidency, of course, path-breaking decisions or re-establishment of diplomatic relations with Cuba. I think a generation of Americans grew up.
No, I think we'll go into that in detail in just a bit. But, talking about something else that you raised about Iraq and Qamar Agha, as far as the troops and military is concerned, there were about 200,000 or 1,80,000 troops to be precise when Obama became the president that were in Iraq and Afghanistan in that particular region. He ensured that, all those troops were pulled out of West Asia. But then the critics say that as a result of that, that gave rise to the ISIS or Islamic State, and that in turn destabilized the region.
Yeah, that is true, There are many factors. This is one of the factors, Because problem was there already. Al-Qaeda was there in Iraq before that, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, that was known. Then Al-Qaeda in Arabian Peninsula, they started calling. Then after the Obama, they started calling Al-Qaeda in the whole region, Iraq and Levant, ISIS was created, out of Al-Qaeda came out. That was the problem, that was he has inherited there. And because of the war, that has further worsened the situation over there. And ISIS, a new form has taken place, ISIS came into being, then sectarian conflict was there also, because that was also going in. And ISIS was part of it, basically the organization was created to fight with the growing Shia influence in that region, Ark of Shia, which was dubbed, that included Iran's influence, or Iran, Syria, Iraq, and part of in Yemen, this is and Lebanon, so that was the thing. You see what was happening at that time, the many regional powers in that area, they were using these militant as a proxy in these countries to gain influence over the region, you know. Pakistan, like Pakistan in this part of the Asia, in South Asia and Central Asia, and the other Arab countries, you know, the oil producing monarchs, some of the monarchs in Arab countries, you know, they were using them to gain influence in Iraq or Syria. So there were a number of factors, you know. Yes, of course, many blamed, you know, Obama is responsible. Even if his troops would have been there, you know, these organizations would continue to operate in that country.
Indeed.
This is what I was. The biggest other important aspect of his, in the region, you know, in this region was Iran deal. That was one of the biggest move, you know, making nuclear deal possible, you know. That was his real. Otherwise, everybody was, you know, expecting a war is going to.
But will Trump, you know, carry on that path, and will the Iran nuclear deal remain to be what it is? Remains to be seen. That is a question that will be answered in the near future. But yes, Ambassador, you wanted to make a point?
Yes. Very briefly, as somebody said that it's easy to start a war, but to stop the war and knowing when to end the war is the most difficult question. And the problem in both Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Yemen, you take any country in that area has been that the war was started basically either by USA or because of USA or because of the West. But they don't have an end game in sight. Afghanistan, the same thing happened. You have a civil government there, you had Karzai before, you have Ghani now, but you did not take care of basically the reasons which were leading to all that tension in the area, all that internecine fights, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and then now ISIL has taken responsibility for the attacks in near Kabul. So you don't have solution to those things really. On the other, you kept on encouraging Taliban indirectly. You brought in several countries who actually had an interest in continuing with those elements to work in Afghanistan. Iraq, see what is happening there now really. So I think essentially the American policies in that area are a mixed bag really speaking.
Sure.
They have not.
Yes, very quick point so that I can move on to other subjects. Yes, Mr. Agha.
I just want to, I fully support what Ambassador has just now mentioned. You know, the problem was policy of regime change. It doesn't work. He was able to topple the regime, Bush was able to topple the regime in Iraq, Afghanistan, and then, you know, during Barack Obama's time, you know, the regime was toppled in Libya. But they were unable to form pro-West government. So they have achieved only half goal, you know.
Indeed.
If the regime would have been toppled by the local people in Iraq or other places, Libya or now Syria, you know, these things would have been taken care. I mean, these elements would have been, we wouldn't have seen such elements to emerge. Or even if they would have come, local people would have managed because, but the problem is, you know, outside forces, they come and it was a big force, American, they were very successful in toppling Saddam Hussein, and then, you know, the local, I mean, the vacuum was filled by these groups.
Yes,
you know.
yes,
I just wanted to say that it's a problematic affair when you generalize things. I think all four cases to my mind are quite different. In Yemen, there was no US role actually. The problem was in Libya, where they actually went for a regime change and created, unleashed instability. As far as Iraq is concerned, I think the colonial construct itself was artificial. And as and when there was bound to be actually a shake-up. And when US withdrew, if you see, Iraq was relatively stable. Actually, they had managed to usher in a democratic regime in a region where democracy was an anathema. They ushered in, it was quite stable, it was working. Of course, there were other issues which came into play because Iraq inherently was actually an artificial construct cobbled up by the colonial masters, and I think it had to unravel at some stage or something like that.
Sure.
As far as Syria is concerned, I think he showed a great deal of maturity in not jumping into the quagmire when France was specially urging US to move into it. There were a large number of people in the US who were actually asking him. And as far as Afghanistan is concerned, it was only his, I think, the domestic pressure which wanted troops to come back, I think, which led them to start cultivating Taliban to find a negotiated settlement so as to project to the people. Of course, one should not deny him his great day that he managed to eliminate Osama. And that fact must be.
He avenged the killings of 9/11, and that's something that he was, hailed for back home in the United States. But let's move on now from the military and talk about one of Obama's pet projects, Obamacare. Professor Mahapatra, Barack Obama has received immense criticism from Obamacare. Donald Trump even has gone on to say that he's vowed really to end Obamacare and bring in something new. Now, he's not given us details as to what this something new really is going to be. But is Obamacare going to be Barack Obama's Achilles heel, really?
It's always easy to criticize and more difficult to come up with a very credible plan. Healthcare debate has been going on in the United States for decades, and it was extremely difficult for successive American presidents to come up with a new plan and implement it. Hillary Clinton, when she was the first lady, she had a very ambitious healthcare plan, and that got bogged down in the American Congress and the American debate. For the first time in recent American history, an American president was able to come up with some plan which would help a large number of poor people to have some kind of affordable insurance policy. Now, critics are always there and they are criticizing. By and large, the Democrats are liberal people and the Republicans are conservative. The Democrats are by and large pro-poor and pro-working class, and the Republicans always support the big industry and the corporate America. Now, when Obama started his affordable health care program, at least 20 million poor people had some plan to buy, and they have bought it already. Now, if you compare the healthcare policy of the European countries, the Scandinavian countries, and the United States, the US performance is pathetic. More than 40 million people don't even have any kind of health insurance. Without having health insurance, living in the United States is extremely difficult. I can cite you a very old statistics. Now things could have been worse actually, that every year 70,000 people in the US die out of ordinary flu, the old people, simply because people can't afford an affordable health care plan, that is insurance policy. So Donald Trump, who is by and large going to be pro-America and a capitalist, himself is a businessman. Out of 21 odd people he has already nominated, most of them are elderly people, billionaires, and white Americans. Whereas Obama, who happens to be one of the most credible democratic leaders, supportive of the downtrodden and underprivileged, he has been able to come up with a plan. If the next administration is going to dismantle the whole thing, it is going to be bad for the American people, and there is going to be a tremendous amount of resistance on that also. So I think that Obama did a good job, and the policy has at least helped a large number of American people, and any attempt to completely undo it is going to be unfortunate for the American society.
Indeed. Ambassador, let's take the debate forward and let's talk about something else now. Yeah. Let's talk about, the foreign policy as far as, America has seen over the last 8 years. One of the achievements, like we spoke about earlier, the Iran nuclear deal. Another achievement, the thaw in the relationship between Cuba and the United States. That was something unprecedented. That was something that was never seen. So that clearly were some of the other achievements of Obama, weren't they?
Yes. What I said about the policy in the Middle East and the Gulf, etc., and I call it a mixed bag. I think Obama started with a great vision. I mean, you remember his speech in the Cairo University when he was visiting Egypt. There was great expectation that he is a great visionary, and he got the Nobel Prize really. I mean, for the kind of vision he had in terms of establishing bringing the world peace. But I think as he went along, the constraints of the realpolitik existing both in the USA and globally began to really restrict whatever his vision was. And therefore, if we look now at the end of 8 years, and if we really make a balance sheet of the debits and credits, you can mention Cuba, yes. It happened just in the last year of his presidency, great success. Iran happened in the last year of his presidency. I really wonder if he had been president for another 2 years, where would Cuba and Iran gone? Where would have gone? Because as it is, even before the elections, we began to hear whispers about the problems in implementation of agreement with Iran. We began to hear some of the difficulties in terms of establishing the, the migrations and the trade, etc., despite all the efforts by Obama. I think in the other areas, we of course have a great deal to be satisfied about. But I suppose that we will talk about the bilateral relations later in a larger manner. We have a great deal to be happy about because Obama had a place, he called it the Asian pivot. So for us, we were actually on the seventh cloud.
Indeed.
But I think if you look at the other areas, it's again a very, very mixed kind of a thing. Look at the Pacific. You have a great deal of uncertainty there, with China really becoming more active, asserting its claim in the South China Seas, and there was no credible response from USA to what China was doing in the South China Seas. Pacific, USA was on the retreat. The TPP did not really get off. In Africa, again, I cannot think of any great path-breaking achievement in Africa. Middle East, Gulf, etc. And if we talk about Iran, again, one implication of Iran is that the fulcrum of Arab politics, Saudi Arabia, got into complete doldrums.
Yes.
So essentially, Russia. If you look at the whole, we can talk in great detail about what happened in different areas. But it's again a very mixed kind of a thing. There is a great vision.
One more aspect of it, Alok Bansal, is the fact that Israel and US relations also soured,
Yes.
Towards the end. We saw Benjamin Netanyahu, in fact, openly criticizing Barack Obama.
In fact, I think one has to grant it. That's what I was trying to say, that Obama took certain path-breaking decisions. But it was difficult to wade through the American establishment to pursue. I think his relations with Netanyahu was very, very strained. But it is only towards the end of his tenure that the US abstained and a UN resolution could go through. Because all said and done.
Can I interrupt? It happened basically because he was in the last stages and he knew
No,
that he could
maybe,
do it.
whatever it is. But his commitment
Yes.
was there. I think the strain between US and Israel was for everyone to see. I think the body language between the two leaders was for quite some time. He may not have been because of the domestic compulsions, he could not pursue. But Obama in principle was opposed to the policy of growing Jewish settlements in West Bank, and I think which was actually negating the the principle completely. But I think on other fronts, I think even on Afghanistan, he came out with a policy but kept flip-flopping. And I think, to my mind, I think the strength of a diplomat is that you should be able to make changes when required. Like he wanted to pull out all the troops by a particular date, then he realized it's not feasible. He wanted to go in for a negotiated settlement, he realized it's not feasible. So he could make those. Similarly with Iran, I think there were so many times when you thought the talks would break, but it was actually his perseverance that, and because of these good relations with Iran, it gave him greater flexibility in the Middle East. The House of Al Saud, which is to my mind today the epicenter of global terror, I think has come under immense pressure because of two factors. One is of course the rapprochement with Iran and US becoming a net exporter of energy. I think, and that's why US could take a pragmatic decision, and now Syria seems to be stabilizing. He provided active support in Iraq at some stage. Of course, one may argue that he could have done it earlier. He did it a little later. With Russia, yes, he did have problems. But even with China, it was blow hot, blow cold. But I think a certain level of equilibrium was maintained with China.
I think China is going to get extremely serious in the near future because of the kind of messages that Donald Trump has sent. Mr. Raga, he has already questioned the one China policy. He has he has telephoned the premier of Taiwan. Also, the Taiwanese premier has visited the United States. So, I mean, that relationship certainly needs to be watched in the near future.
That's true, But, he started, towards the end, last 2-3 years, he started withdrawing from the Middle East and giving emphasis to Asia pivot, that was basically, the Pacific, Asia Pacific he was talking, And of late, he started dealing with the Japan, Australia to contain growing, Chinese muscle flexing in the region. So there are moves, he was there, and I hope, the new president would take. What happened, he is president elect has taken a very tough line.
I can see Professor Mahapatra, wants to come into the debate. I've got very short time. I mean, I'm running out of time, so I'd like you to have the last word on the program. Professor Mahapatra, go ahead, please.
Okay, I just wanted to say something on China. The Chinese initially were really happy, and they wished that if Donald Trump would come to power, that would be good for them, because Donald said that he is not going to underwrite the security of the Japanese and the South Koreans. If they want, they can make the bomb and fend for themselves. And he opposed the TPP. So the Chinese thought that he is going to put less strategic pressure on China, and China could have the ball game in the whole of Asia Pacific. But the moment he becomes president-elect from a presidential candidate, and he talks to the Taiwanese president, he raises the issue about taxation on the imported Chinese goods. He challenges the currency policy of China. Then Chinese are really concerned, worried. In times to come, I can confidently say that tremendous amount of cold confrontation is going to go on between China and the USA, particularly in South China Sea, where an underwater craft of the Americans, which was doing some surveillance work, was captured by the Chinese. And the way Donald Trump behaved, earlier when it was the EP3 incident, George Bush was the president, newly president. In April, I think that incident took place a few months after he assumed the presidency. The Chinese arrested about 24 Americans, put them behind the bars for 11 days, demanded an apology, and got it also, dismantled that particular American aircraft. And that was a humiliation for America. But this time, Donald Trump said, "You have captured our craft, keep it." So the way Donald Trump is behaving towards China, the Chinese government doesn't know how to manage this guy. So in times to come, it is going to be difficult days in the Asia Pacific between the emerging superpower and the existing superpower, which is trying to stop his decline and make America great again.
Indeed, indeed. All right. Yes, Ambassador, quick point, because
I think there is a lot of grandstanding here from Trump on China. Trump is driven basically by the economic interests of the USA, and he's soon going to realize that without China being a partner in that economic relationship, those interests are going to be affected.
So it's a hard lesson that
it's
he's
a
going
hard
to learn.
lesson. I think give 2 years and he will be. Yes.
All right, but Donald Trump, the president-elect, and Donald Trump, the candidate, are two different people.
Undoubtedly.
And two different people. And on that note, I'm going to have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Chintamani Mahapatra, Suresh K. Goyal, Kamar Aga, and Alok Bansal. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you so much for watching.